which is about Gen Z and some of the difficulties that they're having in terms of mental health. But this session today, this is in the Cities program. We're going to be looking at how changes in the way Gen Z is and what they value, how they want to live, is going to have enormous impact for what gets built, what gets planned over the next many decades. And so with us to talk about that, we have Hauwa Mufti, who is an architect and a global shaper. We have Mark Rose, who's the chairman and CEO of Avison Young. And we have Janet Truncale, who is the global chair and chief executive officer at EY. I thought I'd make a few opening remarks, and let's see if people are not so much behind me, all right, but I prefer to stand and talk. So let me just make a few opening remarks to set the stage here. I, like many professors, noticed that the students coming into college in 2015 or so were very different from those before. They were much more anxious. They had much more needs for safety. And it wasn't just the US. It was true certainly in all the English-speaking countries and to lesser extents in other countries. I then gathered all the research I could find on trends in mental health. And what I found is that if you look at levels of anxiety, depression, self-harm, they were fairly stable in the United States from the 90s through 2010, 2011, no sign of a change. And then all of a sudden, very, very sharp elbows in the curves. Rates of depression, anxiety, and self-harm skyrocket. The elbows are very sharp for girls. It's like someone turned on a switch and girls started checking into psychiatric emergency wards for self-harm. And this wasn't just the US, it happened in all the English-speaking countries at the same time. And we have data, Scandinavia, we have data from Scandinavia, it's happening there. Europe as a whole, not so much in Eastern Europe, but it is happening across Europe. We don't have good data from the developing world, so we don't know as much about that, but we're working on that. Now, the reason I bring it up here is because we have to talk about what caused this. And the story that I tell in the book is that it's a tragedy in two acts. In Act 1, we lost the play-based childhood. So I presume most people in this room, or certainly Americans or Canadians and Brits who are older than 35, we all ran around outside when we were kids. We got on our bicycles and went over to our friend's house. And all of that stopped in the 90s in many countries, not so much in Northern Europe. But we lost the play-based childhood. And kids need to play, to run around, to develop social skills. So that's Act 1, from the 90s to about 2010. And Act 2 is the arrival of the phone-based childhood, when young people traded in their flip phones or basic phones that they used to text each other for smartphones with front-facing cameras and Instagram. Now you could be on for literally 10 hours a day, and it changed everything about the way you feel about yourself, about how you interact with the world. It blocked out, it pushed out most of everything else, from sleep, through exercise, through shared laughter with friends. And so the story here is this tragedy in two acts, and that's what you see in the book. But towards the end of writing the book, we realized, wait, there's actually a third act, and it came first. Because why did we stop letting our kids out in the 90s? The crime rate was plummeting in the US. And why did they stop letting their kids out in Canada and Britain, where they didn't have the very high levels of crime that we have in the US? What happened? And the answer, it looks like, is that we had a long-running decline of community. If you know the book Bowling Alone by Robert Putnam, we had a huge amount of communal organizations, trust. Americans had, well, much of the world had been through a world war together. We had very high social capital, very strong communal elements. But that began to fade away in the 70s and 80s, in part because we were watching television and sitting in our cars. But for a variety of reasons, social capital plummeted in the 90s, and that's why we stopped letting our kids out. We didn't trust our neighbors. So now where are we? So young people, if you're born after 1995, you are Gen Z. And one of the most notable features is that Gen Z is the most connected generation in history, which makes them the loneliest. Because it's those connections, 10, 15 hours, many, many hours a day, are all just, it's through your fingers and swiping. It's not human connection. There's something that happens, in a room when we're together physically as biological creatures. And so Gen Z has been largely deprived of that. And this, I think, is greatly affecting their mental health. But it also affects a lot about how they want to live. because they need more. We have to all think harder about how to put people into contact with each other. And of course, the workplace, we'll be talking about the workplace as a key area, but also how they want to live. You know, the older idea of, you know, I'll get married, I'll have a house with, you know, a yard and kid, whatever ideal you had, this generation is going to be living very, very differently. And this has enormous implications for everything going forward. So that's my sort of scene setting, and I've now told you everything that I know that I could possibly contribute to this conversation. So from here on in, it's up to the other panelists. So I'll start, let's see. We'll start with Hauwa. Hauwa, just tell us your story and how it is that you came to be a thinker about built environments and generational differences.
Yeah, so my name is Hauwa Mufti. I am an architect, and I work in the northeast of Nigeria. I am from the northeast as well. So you said, what are the things that makes me want to that makes me start working in this context, right? So for us, the young people that are coming up in Nigeria, the Gen Zs in Nigeria, we've gone through a lot of different experiences, right? And it is only psychological that experiences behavior, experiences our environments, it actually influences our behavior. So a lot of what you see, how you describe us is actually influenced by the experiences we've had. So for me, growing up as a young person, I was exposed to, when I was in school, we had this abduction, the Chibok girls abduction. So a lot of people were in school, and then one day, they just called us on the assembly ground and said, okay, everybody needs to go back home because the school system is not longer safe. We all need to go home. So I was in boarding school. I had to leave and go home, right? So that is one. After then, we had the Ebola virus. Yes, so you see how that also impacted community and also disrupted the normal way of life, right? Then we had the COVID, we had the pandemic that shut down the entire world. So for us, these kinds of experiences, and then from the northeast, we also have the Boko Haram. We have several atrocities that have been inflicted on people, on families, on communities. So all of these have actually shaped the way we think, and it has actually built a form of behavior that we now see today, and you say, okay, Gen Zs are these, Gen Zs are that, right? So for most of us now, when we're looking at building, owning a home, we look at safety. Our safety and security is paramount to us, right? Because we've actually had the experience of not being safe. School is not longer safe. And that is why you see most of young people in Nigeria also, and Africa, even around the world, right, actually trying to use the digital space, consume the information. Learning and education has actually shifted a lot into the digital perspective, into the digital platforms as well. We have a lot of climate disasters that are impacting us. Like 2 months ago, before I came here, we had one community very close to mine as well. Mine was also identified to be at risk of floods. And then we had these floods that have submerged the entire city. And then you see how young people are being, those kinds of things that we see, they actually make us fear for the future. And that is why we are so anxious, because when you want to purchase anything, you have to do all the math, make sure that this place is safe. Because we also look at the sustainability. How is it going to be in the future? Is it a good choice for me, right? So these are part of the things that we actually consider a lot as well. We've seen things like the pandemic, and then this gives us so much tilt towards public health. What is the fate of the communities as we go further, right? So whatever we do in terms of building, in terms of our cities, in terms of the way we work, we so prioritize public health so much, because we've seen the effects. We've seen how it has really, because during the pandemic, we had a lot of people coming up with mental health problems. We had a lot of disconnect in the community. It has impacted us so badly. So we are really concerned about this public health problems as well as mental health, because obviously the repercussions of what has happened. So a lot of these experiences, and then for somebody like me that I'm into the built environment, right? I'm into building spaces and creating spaces for people. For me, I look at it, my home should be able to accommodate my working. I should be able to work in a very comfortable space in my home that I feel safe in, and that I'm sure that nothing would happen. So there's a lot of that, and you could see that. In terms of the kinds of the way we design our homes. We want a place that is comfortable to live, to work, to socialize. So everything is being encompassed in the home. So yeah,
which is going to have tremendous implications for trying to create communities larger than a home. When we're talking about a generation, it's always hazardous to make generalizations about people born in a certain period in one country. And then to now talk across many countries. Obviously, the experience of growing up in Nigeria is so different from other countries. Interestingly, the same move to safety happened in the United States and Britain and Canada, where life was getting safer and safer. The crime rate was dropping. But yet Gen Z was much more concerned about threats. Anxiety is the central disorder. They're much more likely to see threats than previous generations did, even though their world is getting safer and safer. But obviously, you have a really clear explanation for why it is completely legitimate to create physically safe places. Whereas for American Gen Z or in other countries, it might be the case that their instinct is to stay in the home, but that's going to further the loop of depression, and that we have to find ways that the built environment can put them into interaction with each other, but obviously different across countries. Janet, you have a lot of experience, so you know a lot about how generations differ within your organization. What are you seeing? What can you tell us?
Well, first of all, I'm so excited that we're actually talking about talent and generations here at the World Economic Forum. I think it's great that we have someone from Gen Z with us as part of the panel as well. Yeah, but for the first time, we have 5 generations working together, and I think that's an opportunity and a challenge. If you look at the stats, Gen Z will make up 30% of the working population by 2030, and a lot of the developing workforces are shrinking, and so I think these are the things that we're challenged with. Just to give you some perspective about EY, we are 400,000 people in about 150 countries. Amazing. So I do think we should have a perspective on generations. But where we're a little different is that our median age of our workforce is 30. We are already at greater than 1/3 of our workforce being Gen Z, and by 2030, our workforce will be 70% Gen Z, and only 6% my generation, which is Gen X. And for the record, I'm raising 3 children who are Gen Z, so I have a personal perspective as well. And so for me, it's all about how do you work with 5 generations today. And for me, it's all about having multi-generational collaboration. I think that's really important. The younger generation wants personalization. I think you have to really think about how do you attract the young talent while giving great experiences, to the more experienced workforce. I think we have to really focus on upskilling and what does that mean for each of the generations, and different pace for many of them. And then I really think that we have to, in a world that is dominated by technological disruption, and that's been the conversation here this week, we still have to remember we are people, businesses, and humans at the center, and to get that balance right. And there was a lot of discussion this week about, are you going to be managing a workforce of people? Are you going to be managing a workforce of people and agents? But I think at the core of that, for me, it's about making sure that we keep humans at the center. And those are things like ethics, culture is so important, collaboration. And, I worry about some of the younger generations that are in their phone and all the time. They're missing out on some of these skills that are so important to success in the long run.
Well, thank you, Janet. So you have the most amazing possible data set. Do you have across the organization surveys of values and desires and things like that?
We do. So we study it all the time.
You publish
and I think that's very important. We do. Actually, this last couple of weeks, I've published a blog. We have a bunch of research out on generations. And that's an area that I've challenged our team because we have, such a wealth of information.
So how do we find your blog? What's it called? What do we search for?
It's on the WEF website, so you'll see it.
Okay.
It was published on Monday.
Okay, very good.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, and now turning to Mark, So you guide investors, you think about long-term trends, you think about how this change of generations is going to have just huge, what's going to change the map, as this title of our session is. What are you seeing and what are you planning for? What are you telling your people to look for in the future?
Yeah, so we're going to start with a little bit of a funnel, and get there. But before we start, I just want to ask, did everybody see when Janet spoke about the older generations that she looked at me?
I was looking for a friend.
Yeah. I still think I'm Gen Z. I just kind of throwing it out there. We could not be in a better place to be talking about these things. And, there was a session earlier where we were talking within our real estate community about, for example, it is sort of in vogue to try to, to run away from two sets of three letters, so ESG and DEI for obvious reasons or under debate. When we discuss that and what that means to the built environment and what it means to investment, but the stunning other side of this was that we were all going to come together to talk about Gen Z, who, if you don't cater to those very things and make those available, they're not coming into the office, right? So we're going to have to figure out something that, again, our company, Avison Young, like EY, we led a track on social value and developed a social value framework that we published with WEF, and again, it's on the website, talking about what do people want, what does, and this, in this generation, it is absolutely clear, with what they want. They want to be social. They want to be part of community. They want things to be affordable. Right? It's not as much fun. Parents are still paying an awful lot for their kids these days. They don't want that, but there's an affordability issue. They want a walkability issue. That they do worry about crime. It's really safety. Yeah. And much like Janet, we do our own surveys and then we do them for Fortune 500s and, and others. And for example, there are certain cities in the US that people are afraid to walk from the train station to their office. Mm-hmm. That's a concern. So these are things that come full circle here. There has to be a discussion. And we're finding tract after tract for what we're doing here with Gen Z, real estate, or things that we're discussing, at the World Economic Forum, that getting public sector, private sector, and the community to talk and see what does this mean. Asking people, well, what would make you comfortable to come in, right? This work from home thing went from, yes, I love hybrid because, again, I want to take off for 3 weeks and find myself, has now moved over to, I'm missing out on verbals and nonverbals. Maybe I'm not being developed. So I want to be in the office and I want to be with people. Mm-hmm. Here's some of the things that are just basics for me. It's brand, right? It's purpose. It's again, all of the other things that we said about building cities. All of those things are pretty much must-haves now for this workforce.
Mm-hmm. So I want to underline a word that Janet used, which was multi-generational, and I think this might be relevant to all of us here. One thing that I'm concerned about, I study cultural psychology and anthropology, and culture has always been passed down vertically from generation to generation, from grandparents, from parents to children, with modification. That's the way our species has always lived. But until now, because now young people are not very connected to things that came before, certainly not to things that happened 50 years ago or things that were written 50 years ago. The electronic environment allows for such very, very rapid horizontal transmission. So that, so Gen Z in Nigeria and other countries are sort of influencing each other, perhaps even more than parents are influencing their kids. And I think this means a sort of a loss of access to the wisdom of humanity, certainly of your own culture or your generations. And it also, I think, contributes to loneliness if you don't have those strong relations, and especially at work, where we're also aware since COVID that Gen Z really missed out on a lot of mentorship, and we need to really make it up for that. So a question for any of you who want to think about it, what can you do, or what would it take to create more intergenerational contact? Was that your word? Or
collaboration.
Intergenerational collaboration, whether it be at home, whether it be in the office. What do you think? Whoever wants to.
Look, I'll answer that. So you made a couple things about, culture being passed down. I think for us now in our workforce, you got to think about it the other way. I think Gen Z is pulling us into their orbit, and we can't resist it. And for me, when I came into role, we were doing a bunch of different things, and I said, we have to think about everything different. Than we've done in the past, whether that's learning, whether that's communication, which are really important in a business the size of mine. So a couple things I'll just say, on the learning, right? We have to throw out everything that we knew about how we all learned, and we have to meet our younger generations where they're at. And they want all their learning to be as easy as it is to swipe an app on a phone, and they want information in bite size. They're getting their learning from different places. So we're launching learning, on social media. And so I think that's a huge shift for us, and the pace of that change is tremendous. From a communications perspective, I want to be communicated with very differently than Gen Z. And we're starting to take the messages that are most important in our organization and adapt, right? So we're doing podcasts for my generation, which that's new and different. But again, for the younger generation, videos are, and you're going to start to see more and more CEOs talking about strategy and the vision of their companies, through videos, while they're running or exercising. They want to see where we are. They want to understand what we're doing. So I think those are things that are really important. So those are the ways that you're going to have to, really figure out and recognize that it's not one size that fits all. And that, again, for me, 70% by 2030 is going to be Gen Z. So recognize that, and that is happening no matter what, what you do. And you really have to meet, our different generations where they're at. So those are a couple of areas that I would give you.
Very helpful. We need to move to audience questions very soon, but if either of you have a brief comment on that, please go ahead.
You go.
Yeah. So as much as culture is very important, it is important to pass those values from one generation to another. I also think that it is important for us to recognize that Gen Zs are people that they have great sense of self. They know who they are, and they want. You could not. Yeah, you can try to describe Gen Z under one umbrella, but no two Gen Zs conform to one standard. Everyone has their own standard. What works for the other person doesn't really need to work for the other person. So trying to pass down a particular strict culture to this generation is quite a task. So I'd say we should make things more flexible and adaptable, like you've said, right? When you employ somebody, try to know try to kind of have a survey, make the work, how do you want to work? And there are companies that have actually implemented this, because at the end of the day, it is the results that we want, right? If you want the results, I mean, the process, yes, should be a little bit more flexible. And I think you'd be able to carry a lot of them, and your companies will be more appealing to young people and Gen Zs as a whole to work in.
Okay, so flexibility, two-way transmission, not just the vertical. Mark, do you have a brief comment on that?
Yeah, I'd say honesty and transparency. In my 41 years plus, I know, do the math, I started at 5, but it tells you that people want to be noticed a certain way, dealt with a certain way. We talk about as well in our company when we would get somebody a little older, a little more experienced, saying, I want you to call me, don't text me, and don't email, something we would all love. I don't know that we can pull that back. Okay, it really would be a wonderful thing if we can get people to use phones again, but how much cost or how much effort are you going to put in to try to change something that clearly has shifted, and you find yourself building process and strategy around communicating a different way? And so these are just things that you have to be pragmatic. This Gen Z group, they are pragmatic, and you're absolutely right. You know who you are. And there has to be this work between, can we maybe show you something and that could also work? But, I'm going to keep coming back to the dialogues about finding a way for people to get agreement as to how you function, and particularly as you started, this is a whole other session. quite concerned about the mental health of young people in this world right now. And again, it's very different, in very different places. We spend time, this is what I was starting with the 41 years here of trying to teach people global culture is a holy grail, but very difficult to find because subcultures around the world want to rise up to their fullest potential, and that means we're just not going to do things the same way. Right. There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah, okay, good, thank you. So yeah, thank you all. Audience questions. We have a microphone coming around, and please do wait for the microphone because we want the telecast audience to hear you. So let's start with Alicia, or where's the microphone? Oh, yes.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. My name's Alicia London. I'm a young local leader, and I am CEO at Global. My question is, I wanted to ask, are there areas around some of those wants that I think you use the word we should resist? Are there areas we should, or not? Yeah. And I think for context here, what we do at Spira is, I've been a long time mental health advocate, so there's a lot companies and workplaces can be doing to improve mental health, and know a lot of that. But what we found recently through... It's not working. That's better. Hi. What we found recently, we're finding companies and CEOs and leadership really struggling to actually find things that work in the workplace. And so instead of giving some generic, here are 10 things we know work generically, we'll go in and do a diagnostic assessment to really understand what's going on. We do it across workplace, product, and wider impact. But on workplace, we found one thing that's really fascinating. This is US-UK data, just for context. What we're finding often, one of the biggest challenges that comes up is expectations around levels of stress. And so 50% of recent employees we've surveyed and 50% of Americans we've polled with Ipsos have found that Gen Z, an expectation is workplaces should create no stress.
No stress.
No stress. 50%. And and I think the relief in the CEO when you say, actually, here are things you do need to improve. Actually, here's somewhere where you probably need to reset your psychological contract with your staff around expectations. And how do you do that? And we found that's actually improved mental health outcomes over time. And so are there other areas you're finding there? There are some areas to push back rather than just accept. And that's just one example.
Yeah, that's a great question.
I'll go very quickly. As a culture-based organization, we find ourselves saying this weekly, if not daily. The commercial real estate services industry has just gone through 4 pretty challenging years from COVID to some debt issues. And what we have said, first of all, from a mental wellness point of view, if you're not having a good day, go home, it's fine, right? Take care of yourself, put your oxygen mask on, take care of yourself, because if you're not okay, you're not going to be helping anyone else. Second thing is stress things that are in your, stress over the things that are in your control, and try not to stress too much about things that are out of your control. Anyone who thinks they're going to live in a world with no stress, I mean, obviously it's not realistic. But if we can explain things like innovate, try, if you fail, it's okay. But it's the company and leadership that has to make sure that you are living by your words. Try things. If it doesn't work, maybe not try it again. Try something else. But there is a way to de-stress the extremes, right? But I think anyone who really wants to do well and really wants to work at something and really cares about their learning and development, yeah, they're going to stress.
Okay. I would say 2 things. So I think you have to be very direct about it. We actually just launched our new employee value proposition, and we talk about developing, empowering, and fueling. And so as part of that, a real focus on learning and development, but a real focus on wellness, because we know life is stressful, work is stressful, but we want you to take responsibility for your wellness. Like, we can do all the right things, but we need our professionals to take advantage of that. So I think that's really important, just being really directional and about that. And then, there's a lot of discussion this week about return to office and what different companies are doing. Again, we've got to meet our employees where they are. So we will always continue to be hybrid. But I think the loneliness that you talk about, isolation, this younger generation wants to be social. They want to be together. And I think it's important to say there are things and parts of your job that you can absolutely do alone in the safety of your home and be really productive. But there are also things that are really important to our firm and our culture where we want you to be together, where we want that innovative spirit, where we want to have collaboration, where we get the benefit of different perspectives being together. And that we have to be, that's non-negotiable. And so I think being really clear about the expectations of where are we at our best when we're together and where can we be at our best when we're working alone, I think that's really important as well.
Okay, great. Those are helpful answers. We should move on to, let's try to get a few questions in. All right, we'll do it over here.
So historically, Generation Z really has things to be afraid of. In the United States, in 2001, we had the World Trade Center, and everyone was afraid. But that was followed by the Columbine shootings in schools, and we have a list. We're having so many lockdowns, okay? So then let's just go a little further. Bullying. Used to be if you made a mistake and you tripped and you fell down the stairs in high school, everyone laughed and it went away. But now they're taking pictures and it's all over Facebook. Why would you want to leave your house? Why? And then all your friends, you have the mean girls, you have, I mean, I wouldn't want to be growing up in that generation. It is very scary.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I'll just respond by saying, in each country there are events, and we had a number of events, school shootings in the 90s and early 2000s, and nothing changed in mental health. And then all of a sudden, in 2012, 2013, everything changes in many countries. So I do hear what you're saying about that there are threats, but often threats bind people together. Economic threats don't seem to really affect kids' mental health very much. But yes, there are, perhaps I downplayed the degree to which life is getting safer in America, if that was your point. Well, compared to the 70s and 80s and early 90s, it is. In terms of crime, death of children, car accidents, things like that. But okay, but that's another argument we can have for another time. Okay, for each questions, I'll try to just have like one person answer. But if you have something to, if you want to put in a quick point, add on. Anyone want to add on briefly to that? Okay. So next, let's go over to this side of the room. And also, if you're Gen Z and have a question, raise your hand. Is there?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go over there next. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you for the floor. My name is Lucas Kistler. I'm a global shaper, politician and architect. I want to just quickly talk about social media. You have brought it up. Well, I think social media promised to be a tool that would connect us, and well, it has connected us in a big way. But I think just in the recent years, we're seeing that it is actually more and more dividing us, and it has become this attention-grabbing advertisement machine that has more and more detrimental effects on mental health of especially young people. And when I look at my friends, they're trying to, more and more trying to quit social media, just they want to come away from these effects, but they don't want to lose those small positive effects that still are there. It is still connecting us. So I'm asking the questions: do we have to act on that? Do we have to start to reglement the social media space? What are your thoughts on this? Thanks.
I'll just very briefly say when technology lets you call or text or do a video call with one person, that's great. But you don't want a $1 trillion company mediating that, because how did they get their $1 trillion? None of us paid them anything. It's your attention that they're monetizing. So avoid the social media companies that are part of the attention economy and are attention fracking, breaking up your time into little bits and sucking out all of your attention. That would be my advice. What would you guys say?
Yeah. So for me, and in the context that I know, social media has been, yeah, it has the good side and also the negative sides, right? But I think it is also important to know that it is a tool that has really helped a lot of communities for us in Nigeria, we use social media a lot because the physical environment that we are, the constraints, like reaching to decision makers, getting jobs, it's so difficult. So with social media, we get a more transparent approach to that. Decision makers are able to actually like act on things when it's put on social media. A lot of people are able to get jobs. For a community that's there's a lot of like job gaps. You understand, social media, with social media, you're able to see what's happening in another continent that has a lot of job openings. So you're able to connect and also get a job through that, right? There's a lot of positives that we've seen, the positive effects of social media. And like, so I think before yes, there should be regulations, right? The only good thing is, we have regulations. So when you implement those regulations, you are able to curtail those issues. And then we shouldn't just say social media is this. It's not a black or white. It's not a black or white judgment. But then social media, you have to look at it, because on the flip side, even you look at the physical interactions, there's also a good and bad aspects of it. So it's just good to weigh each other and you see how it goes. Okay. Yeah, so I think
makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, our Gen Z questioner over here, microphone.
I think it was more of just a comment. I feel as Gen Z, we're seeing that businesses prefer, I think COVID is a good example. When things turned, everything was closed, we couldn't interact or engage. It was business as usual because we were asked to adopt these tools. And now that we have finally adopted these tools and realized that it has worked for us, apparently it has become a challenge for the older generations to kind of come to terms with it. But like Hauwa said, our productivity is still there. And as much as, firms today feel like they're more progressive with, humanistic values first, I feel COVID is a good example where we see it was business as usual. And so I think that's one. But secondly, I think another example in COVID, I'm from Pakistan, is that when I was working from home, I felt like I had more socializing with my family during lunches or during, those evening meals. And in the office, yes, we have that. But as a management consultant, it's usually a working lunch. But this time you kind of really tune out. You get that humanistic element that we were talking about. I felt I learned more of cooking from my mom during that period than I ever did, which is the vertical, wisdom that we're talking about as well. And at the same time, I was being true to myself and socializing. So I really do think that, in a way that for us, I feel like that self-actualization that we have as Gen Z is that businesses is going to be business as usual.
Okay, well, let me put the question to the two panelists who can speak about the corporate world. Is it true that your Gen Z employees are as productive, as efficient, they produce as much as previous generations? If we know that they are learning to cook and they're socializing and they're getting all these benefits from working at home, are they still doing the work, or do you find that actually their lives are more complicated with mental health issues? What do you think?
So,
and remember, this is live streamed and recorded.
I know. The problem is this needs about an hour and I need to do it in 30 seconds. They're clearly, so there's clearly an impact here. Before I go to that exact question, I wanted to hit the social media and the connection point. I really think that the biggest issue that we're facing is a really bad group of parents, a historically bad group of parents who are not parenting their kids anymore. And if you take a look at parents who care about what their kids are looking on at social media and those that don't, there's a very, very different, result from those, those two things. So kind of flipping over to weight, because I think Gen Z has figured out the use of ChatGPT takes 10 times the power of putting in a Google search, which is going to lead to inflation in energy, as we're seeing, which leads to more, you know, on the affordability side. So I just want to hit those. As it relates to, yes, young people want to be back, they want to be in the office. RTO is core to what we do, right? The corporate world, it's not our young people and it's not our C-suite. You know, we've done the surveys. It is the senior folks just below the C-suite who, because they're not the C-suite, believe that the time that they have put in gives them the right not to have a commute anymore. We feel that that is a terrible injustice to that next set of levels of kids, because they're not getting developed, they're not hearing the verbals, they're not hearing the nonverbals, and it's already fact. And you know, I just had an article, you know, in the Globe and Mail in Canada on this, which is there are young talent that were not promoted because they were not seen. And so if they do want to be social, if they do want to learn, if they do want to be there, again, we'll connect together the use of the technology, which is there, and it's only going to get, you know, further and further utilized with AI. First time we used AI today, or in this session. But no, I do think they want to be. I think everybody except for a group of people in general want to be there. And what we have today are safety issues and people who don't want to commute. And I think that's a limited number of folks that we need to spend a lot of time on.
Okay. And Janet, what would you say about
Look, I look at it a little differently. I think, you know, the younger generations learn differently. They communicate differently, they get their information differently, and so their productivity is just so different, right? I mean, I read news differently, they want it in bite-sized chunks. So I wouldn't say that one generation's more productive than the other. They're doing things just holistically differently. And for us, I see the same level of work output and ideas and innovation that are coming from that generation than mine. And I think that that's where it comes back to this collaboration, understand, you know, where we can learn from the younger generations and where there's certain things that I go back to the ethics, the values of your company, the things that are important to pass down, but you know, that there's just as much that we can be taking from the younger generations. Okay. And we shouldn't be living a life of comparison.
Okay, great. Okay, we're almost out of time. Are there any final comments that any of you want to make?
I'd like to end it on a positive note. So at least from a business community, we just launched a survey of 1,200 CEOs on Monday. 85% of the CEOs that we surveyed understand these issues, and it's on the top of their agenda. So for the Gen Z in the audience, I want you to know that your leaders understand, they're listening, they're trying to figure this out. And they understand that the businesses that figure out this multi-generational collaboration are going to be the leaders. So I want to leave you on a positive note that we get how important this is.
Okay.
And there's enough data and information to support those leaders, because back to productivity for 1 second, you know, we did studies a long time ago. You take lighting up, your entire workforce is more productive. 6 months later, you take the lighting down, your workforce is more productive. It is the element of change. It is not what you actually.
Wow. Wow. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, for me, I believe that we should focus on the matter at hand, right? We are in the 4th industrial revolution, and change is something that must happen. So rather than wanting to hold what we had in the past, culture, yes, it is very important. Conventional things are really important as well. But we should also tilt towards innovation, creativity within the way we work, flexibility. Those are things that could really help us to come together and function. Even if we have like 5 different generations, when we take these key things and put it in, I think it would all work very cohesively.
Okay, well, I think this was a good intergenerational discussion, and I thank everyone for their attention. And if we have not monetized your attention, this is all. But if you want to talk to any of us afterwards, we'll all hang out for a little bit. Thank you so much.
Thank you.